This is genius.
This is Joe Rogan, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowmen.
I've never seen so many mullets in my life.
No, it's just about feeling good.
You had more chins than a Chinese phone book for a while.
Man.
Yeah, it was bad. Yeah. I mean, he's right. He said, Goonies never say die. We're going.
We got this.
All right.
I was pulling the trigger, but the safety was on.
I just Randy Black Eagle.
That's it. Boom.
That's my.
That's how we roll. Just drop the mic and walk away.
There's different levels of skill.
I'll tell you, like, I've been shooting the hinge all season until I tried to shoot it in the wind in Montana, and that was frustrating, and I talked to Aron about it a little bit, and I decided to shoot a trigger on this hunt because I knew from previous experience that there's a lot of wind here. And, you know, David was really concerned about the hinge and these conditions when we got here. He talked to me about it the first night, and when for me, it's gotten even in my head after hunting in Montana with it in heavy winds. Just the fact that there's wind at all kind of stresses me out and makes it a head case thing even worse, you know? So,
which means you bring your range in, so you take a certain shot that you know, no matter what the conditions, the variables aren't going to affect you.
So I took and I'd shot a trigger my whole life. So, I mean, as long as I've been shooting a compound. So I grabbed the trigger and finger release, the index release, and I started practicing with that for the last 3 weeks and feel very good with the trigger and shot with you, David. And I mean, I feel great shooting the trigger. And then we went out, and the cool thing for me yesterday was I had a lot of help. Because everybody tagged out. So Aron's there and Harder and Brinker, and they're all glassing for me, and they're all helping me, you know, get on a deer. And Aron, you want to tell
I asked Harder if I could lead the stalk because I don't know if this is true. I thought I would help you more with confidence being right beside you than Harder because you were comfortable with me. I have no idea if that was true or not, but I was like, do you care? I'm like, I think I can help him. Like, if we got in close and it was a windy shot, I'm really good at saying, hey, you're going to have a left wind, aim, or whatever the case may be. Whether or not I could have been lying to myself, but
no.
As it turned out, we walked into a giant deer, and I'll let you tell that story. But I know for me, there's certain things that help build. I have a shirt that's as stupid as this sounds. I have a shirt that things seem to just fall over when I wear it, whether it's helping people or whatever. And I have my lucky shirt on yesterday. And
so just tell us the story. You tell it.
I'm going to fast forward through the first stalk, which was super cool. But Bryan and I went up on the hill, bedded a bunch of bucks down. Wind was non-existent, wasn't bad, but we knew those bucks were probably going to stay there. We had them marked really well. Came back out, and all of us are together. Had another buck bedded down that we approached, super old buck, and it was cool because David and I got to chill and hang back and watch this buck forever while you guys rounded the horn and came in on it. And this buck, I mean, he was 8-9 years old for a reason because he was. I mean, you kept looking in the spotter like, man, he's wound, he's wired, birds would fly by him, he'd twitch, and I mean. We ended up, you guys got 70 yards from him, 80 yards, whatever. He came out.
I thought for sure he was going to die. Did.
It looked good. But he ended up walking out on you guys, at 80 and windy, whatever. And, so we went to these next deer.
Yeah. And as soon as he saw Harder's head, he was like, what? And then he bolted.
Yeah.
You know,
cause at first
Harder
he got a,
get an arrow, get him. I'm thinking, there ain't no way. First of all, it's too windy and it's 80 yards. There's no shot right now. There's no sense in having an arrow on this bow.
And I think you were right. He caught like a puff of our wind, just enough to get him out of his bed, not blow him out. He looked around for a while and got out of there. But so we went to the next spot and hiked in. I don't know, it's whatever, half a mile and it was pretty much
to where we all had seen bucks. Because what happens on these hunts is you kind of go out, spot a bunch of deer, see where they go. They drop in this coulee, this canyon, they bed here, and you bed them all. Then you can decide priority-wise, okay, I want to do this. It's a high opportunity hunt, which makes it so fun because you blow one stock, You can go to another one, and sometimes you can have 4 or 5 stalks in one day.
And in this case, where you guys were, your unit, they hadn't been hunted. And I tried to get Lander actually to swap my tag, which he couldn't do because I wanted to hunt where they hadn't been piss pounded, and where we were, they've been pounded for
all week.
3 solid weeks. So anyway, we got up there, and it was a bit, I would call a shit show at first. It was a bit of a goat rope, 4 guys wandering aimlessly, blowing shit out, to where I think at some point, I don't know if I looked at you or you, and I was like, yeah, this 4-man it's got to stop. We got to take 2 guys and move forward. I think I said something like that.
Because we put eyes on 2 bucks.
A 3-point and a forked horn or spike, which ended up not being that. They were much bigger. I don't know, whatever. We got up there, and I looked and started giggling, and I'm like, I may have slightly underestimated these deer. And then you looked in the spotter, and you were like, that thing's huge. And I was like, yeah, that's not that 3-point and that spike from earlier. They kind of did a role reversal with 2 bigger deer.
Swap-a-roo.
You and I started a stalk, and they split, which was good.
These 2 bucks split
one
up.
buck went up, 1 buck went down, and you and I, when that happened, they got out of our sight, and you and I just motored. So then we looked back at some point in time when we were low crawling, and you 2 were behind us, and obviously you knew it was in the clear, and you got up there, and you guys said, hey, the one went back down, but then he went back up into a spot that they couldn't see us, and so we all just maneuvered our way up. I don't know what that was, 400 yards? Something like that?
Yeah, it wasn't too far.
I'm speeding this story up a bit, but when we got up there, we went into the drainage that he was in, and as literally blind luck would have it, I happened to be looking forward at the time. We went into a canyon with absolutely no cover, and I dropped to the ground like a sniper hit me, and I was like, he is right there. And I was like, he's 60 or 80. I'm not sure, but he's right there. He's big. And I would say I was a bit stupefied or dumbfounded because I looked back and I was like, I'm not 100% sure how we're even going to pull this off.
Yeah, because it's really hard to try to draw your bow. There was no cover. We were hiding behind like 12 inches of
Grass.
Yeah. But it was actually red bush, but the wind was it was approaching 50 miles an hour maybe.
At least.
And on the top, maybe 70 up on the ridge lines.
And I was laying behind all of them, like on my stomach. I'm like, just don't screw this up for Bryan. Don't screw this up for Bryan. But I wanted to know so badly what you guys were saying. You're only 5 feet from me, but I could see your lips moving. I'm like, what? I was trying to read your lips. And then I'm like, I want so badly to look up and see, because I knew you were saying he's right there.
At one point, I looked back at you guys and I went, I think 4-0.
Yeah, you said 40. So at that point, I'm just like, you know what? It's too risky for me to even. I'm eager. I'll find out what's going on later. So I just planted myself down.
And I'm popping. Bryan is right beside me, and he's like, "Can I shoot him?" And I'm like, "It's a frontal. Do not shoot right now. We can't."
Because he was facing us, but he had his head down, and I was so glad because Aron barely just caught a glimpse of him, and it could have been the other way around, right? He could have seen Aron first, and then it was over.
I caught a glimpse of him with his head down. Thank God.
Yep.
There's no, and I knew.
And then we all hit the dirt like thump. So now we're on our stomachs because he can see us if you even rise up 12 inches.
And it's probably, how wide was that? 100 yards wide or something?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. And then it was pretty long. Anyway, and he's in the red brush, which is, I don't know, 18 inches tall. Anyway, not very tall, and in spots. So immediately my killing brain goes into effect where I'm like, all right, how the hell are we going to shoot this thing, right? I'm like, and every time I pop my fat head up, the percentage of me getting seen is going up exponentially. And
yeah, Aron didn't want to look.
I didn't want to look. In fact, I was scared to look because that would be the jackass that scared it off. And so the first time I look, and then I gangster ranged, and I'm like, oh, he's close. I was like, he's 40. He's 40, but his head was to the left. And
a frontal.
Yeah, well, it was a frontal then to the left because that time I thought you were going to get to shoot, and he snapped his head forward somewhere in the midst of this 5-minute long crisis, and I mean literally we went 6 feet forward, and that was a big deal because I'm like, we could get to that bush. Do you think? I'm like, do you want to try? And we got to that bush, And you guys moved up too, didn't you?
I
think all four of us, yeah.
I just tried to stay out of the way. But yeah, once I knew you guys were safely up there, I kept belly crawling up. I was basically at Harder's feet, and then Harder was at your feet. It was like a little train.
Yeah, little caterpillar.
I literally am taking my rangefinder. I'm like, click, 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 all the way up, 40, boom, down. I'm like, okay. And he was feeding, and I said, I think I looked back to you and said something about, because you said, I don't know if I can make this shot. And I said, well, keep in mind the wind is blowing more towards us than to the side. Something like that.
Yeah.
And
because the first thing that I was thinking about as we were going up the hill, and I think I even leaned over and told you, Brinker, I was like, man, I kind of need a 20-yard shot with this crosswind. This is like insane wind. Like, I think I can get close because the wind is whipping so hard that, of course, they can't hear a thing, but then you got to make the shot. And so if you don't get close, it's a double-edged sword. You want the wind because it just blinds their senses, and you can get so close. But at the same time, now you got to try to shoot in it. And so I was stressed out. I was worried about that. Well, now here we are, and it's 40 yards away, and the only thing that I thought about was in that little cut, the wind wasn't, it was strong, but it wasn't.
We weren't getting the full effect either because we're all laying under a snake, basically. We're trying to stay as low as we possibly
But I could feel the wind straight in my face instead of across the side of my face. So I was thinking, before Aron even said anything, I'm like, this is a lot easier to shoot in with the wind coming straight at you than the wind. If it was coming from the side, I don't know, man. And so he turned around and thankfully reconfirmed what I was thinking, hey, man, it's straight on. It's a headwind. I think, you're going to be pretty steady, which I needed to hear because, I'm a little worried about the wind. The wind has got me a little frustrated this season.
For those who haven't been in this, position, or if you're just starting to hunt, it's hard for me to express in words what you're feeling at that time. You got a giant deer in front of you. You've got 4 guys with you. You've got or no guys with you, whatever, but you've got guys with you. You've got wind. You've got all these variables. You've got a deer that's feeding to you. What do you do, right? Do you wait for him? My first initial thought, I said, wait, he'll feed to us.
Yeah, he said he'll feed to us, but he started to move a different direction. And
my other thing is I don't know that that's a good idea.
That's exactly what I thought too. I mean, okay, if he comes to 30 yards and then does what he's doing now, to your point, Broderick, we talked about this, let him come closer and shoot the closer shot.
Yeah.
What I was worried if he got that close was now his body and his reaction is involved in also the
Plus
wind.
Just coming up over, again, the skyline or the
weed
him.
line.
We were on the edge of red brush with the yellow grass behind us, which is trying to hide behind a tree from an elk. It's the worst thing you can, because your whole outline, and you had a hat on, and every time I saw it, I mean, any a human head coming over that red, you can imagine that if you're a mule deer.
We were just flat-ass lucky because that deer had his face in the brush.
But if he comes closer trying to draw and then come up without him just going, whoa, and getting out of there, every yard he gets closer,
every yard he gets closer, it's easy for him to see.
Well, and believe me,
that's exactly right.
Me in the back trying to figure out what's going on.
Because you want to play too.
All of these things we're computing. When I say getting your killing brain on, all of these things are running through all of our minds, but running through my mind in the sense of, okay, do we do this? Do we do this? And finally, I think I looked back and I was like, you can kill him. Shoot him at 40. I'm like, I think you should shoot him now.
And I said, yeah, I think so. I feel good about the wind I'm feeling. I feel good about 40-yard range. And if he's going broadside, and it sounds like Aron was like, he's going broadside. I was like, okay. And if I'll get the bow back, I'll settle. And if the wind, if it's just not there, I won't shoot. But I'm going to get back, and I'm going to feel this is a very, very makeable shot for me. And,
and I think that trying to describe, like I was saying in words, the adrenaline, what you feel, I mean, it's almost worth death. I mean, as weird as that sounds, it is such an insane feeling to be that close to an animal of that size, especially with 4 people, because it never happens. You always blow out deer with 4 people. It just never happens.
And we were used to finding them bedded, and then the whole time you're kind of moving it. This was just, we knew he went up a cut, and it was like still hunting with 4 guys on a giant deer, and for some miracle, we were able to see him first.
Yeah, and that was a miracle.
So I think, sorry, Reese is texting me. I think, I don't know, somewhere in all of that or whatever, I looked and I was like, yeah, shoot him broadside. I'll tell you when he's or no, you said, tell me when he's broadside. And I looked over and I'm like, how the hell are you going to even draw? Well, that's your problem. So I looked back forward and I was like, and he turned perfectly broadside at 40 with his head to the right now.
And I had the bow. I was laying down sideways. And so when Aron said he's broadside, I drew the bow back sideways, and then I started to tip it up, and I got in a sitting position, and I tried to not move herky jerky, because these animals, if you move real slow,
The wind helps because they're seeing stuff move.
as long as I'm not moving faster than the wind's moving things,
Yep.
whatever, they just see motion like that. So once I got it back, then I was sitting there and I was like, I'm too low, and I worried about that, but I didn't want to get up on my knees and then try to draw, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I'm on my butt and I can't get high enough. So then I had to move up on my knees, and you were back there watching.
Yeah.
And moved up on my knees. But by then, because I was sitting, I could actually see the deer, and I could see his head was down. So it was kind of nice because I'm at full draw, thankfully, because that's the biggest concern is getting full draw and up. Behind the peep and everything. So once I got there, I was like, okay, now I can just move around. Now, if he looks up, he's going to see this giant cam and this head above the red brush. But somehow I able to get up on my knees. And then that was the thing. Like David said earlier, just shoot the perfect arrow. Try not to, just.
And just to clarify on the perfect arrow thing, I actually don't believe you can shoot a perfect arrow every time either. But I think if you have the goal, you will shoot more better arrows.
Yeah, no, and that's what I agree with. I mean, I think there's no perfect arrow in that the situation we were in. But I think if your goal is to shoot a perfect arrow, it's going to be better than forgetting what your peep sight is and saying, I don't know where I hit it. Your process is going to be much better. Mm-hmm. And you took the shot, and I think you blew. I couldn't see everything because I was watching in the bino, so I could just see where it got hit. And I saw you blow left twice, or right, or whatever. I saw your bow sway, and then I saw my periphery is you steadied up some, and I knew you're probably going to shoot, and then the arrow went off. And then when you shot, you hit low and back, and immediately, well, I think I said the F word, but then it took off, and I was like, well, he's going to die. I was like, he's going to die. And you ended up basically hitting him in the intestines, and he went 100 yards.
Yeah, and then
he didn't go very far, and he bedded up. And then you have the dilemma of, do you pull the Snyder and try and run up and shoot it again? Which there's a huge, do you try to get another arrow and how far do you push it or whatever? And we're all watching it, and he bedded down, and we waited a little while for him to calm down, which is we all agreed with that, for him to kind of get laid up, and we went over to you guys, and which was Harder and Brinker, and I can't remember you guys. We went back. Well, I think we went back over to the pack.
This is 5 minutes later, and there's a coyote within 15 yards of this buck.
Yeah, there's a lot of coyotes.
5 minutes after we shot it.
And you looked at me and said, get over there. Maybe Harder did, but you guys were talking. You said, hey, try to get over there and sneak around. He was in a very approachable position. Somewhere in that red brush, he was able to see us, and he went another 50, 100 yards. And it started to snow a bit then, and the wind was, I don't know if it was 70, but it was horrible.
And he looked bad.
Yeah.
You know, it was a death sentence. He was going to die within 6 hours.
Yeah.
But there's another buck over there and other deer.
They fought.
Yeah. After he's all injured and stuff. And he just looked bad. And now it's like, he just, you know, and when I took that shot in the wind, I was saying it steadied up. I was getting gusted, but it started to give me some breaks. It just stopped and goes dead. And so I kind of timed that shot. But I was talking to you, Broderick, and you were talking about a headwind has a way of really
pushing an arrow down. Well, as the arrow starts to fall, that high wind straight on your face will, you know, increase the rate that it falls. It compounds it faster than it normally would go down. So just in my experience, a strong headwind has always pushed my arrow down a little.
Would have helped to aim just a little higher.
But you don't know. You just don't know. It's an unknown variable.
Right.
So, but either way, we decided to let the buck bed up and expire, and come back early in the morning. And we came back, and Harder and I, because we walked too fast. What did you call it? What did we do? So
the Alberta 240.
Yeah, we did the Alberta 240 back there, and amazing. It was. Well, we had talked last night. We knew the coyotes may get on it, and we were wondering how bad it would be and everything else.
We debated lots of things here, and the concern is we're hunting areas of permission and areas we don't like. These are private property lots. These are farmers,
and he's on the fence.
And he's on the fence, and if he crosses over, we don't have permission in these other areas. So you're balancing these things, like you want to put this thing out of its misery. You want to stalk it and put another arrow on it. If it's public land, as far as you can see, we'd have run him down and shot him. I mean, he was that wounded. He was going to die, but he was going to go into land that was locked.
Well, and I told you guys I'd hit one very similar last year, and I pushed it really hard because I had room.
Yep.
And it just didn't work out like several times, and I just kept pushing them, and finally, like, it just wasn't worth it anymore. So I had to back off and leave them all night. And so we have all these debates going on, all these conversations going on. There's so many variables, and at the end of the day, someone just needs to make the decision. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember who it was or what happened, but I
think Harder and I just came over and we're like, hey, I don't want my pack. We left my pack back and your pack, because that's when we first took off on the stalk, we didn't know you guys were going to come. Looking back now, we probably would have taken them, but our packs were back, and I said, hey, I don't want to leave my pack back there and look for it in the dark. I'm going to go now, and I'm going to go back and get him. And he said, I don't think that buck's going to die it'll die tonight. It'll be after light.
4 or 5 hours.
Yeah. And
it was going to be dark in 45 minutes.
Yeah, pretty quick. And so we decided to leave it and just come back in the morning. Anyway, long story short, or short story really long, the coyotes ate everything. There was nothing left this morning. Literally nothing. There's nothing left.
It was a shocking sight. I mean, it was a shocking sight.
And he died right there.
Yeah, well,
he died right where we left him.
Within 50 yards. I mean, I literally, when I got to it, I was standing there with Harder, and I was like, I mean, there was the guts, the meat, the jawbone, everything had been eaten off that thing in 10 hours, I guess. 10 hours, something
roughly.
like that. Which, I mean, it's hunting. It's not a good thing. It happens, but I was definitely, who knows how
I
many
thought,
dogs
we talked about this. We're like, well, if the coyotes get on it, and we're not familiar with this area.
Yeah. I've left lots of animals overnight, never had them entirely eaten.
It's been done many times, and I've actually never had an animal eaten by a coyote in all the years I've hunted, but I've done a lot of my hunting in Oregon, and like in a lot of it just haven't, and so, yeah. When we showed up this morning, there wasn't a drop of meat on the bones. It had been, even the bones were eaten.
Ribs were broken.
It was heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was.
That's the only word you can use.
Yeah, I mean, it's good we found it. That's a good thing. But yeah, like you said, hey, you just shut the camera off. You're like, man, I don't want to film this. And I said, man, I I'm just going to take photos of that buck on your pack for just so we have for the memory purposes or whatever else. And but it was one of those things where you had said, hey, you guys could have stayed on it, and you were cool about it. You were just like, I'm not being the hindsight guy, but you could have stayed on it. And when you heard the coyotes get on it, which would midnight or whatever time it would have been, and then go in and get it then.
But I also didn't know at the time that the deer was laying right on the property line.
Yep.
And that if you would have tried to push it and pushed it over onto the other property, what people don't realize is there's been major fires out here, and the landowners have basically locked everything down.
Yeah.
If you call them, they just say no and hang up.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things Harder and I had talked about. And me being a professional pusher of animals, like I'm way too aggressive. My buck last year with a gut shot went a mile at least, and 500 yards of that was at a dead sprint. Which I'd say that was a mile probably.
Yeah.
Was okay. If we stay here, what are the potential outcomes? Will the wind shift? Will he wind us? Will it bother him at all? Does it matter if we stay this far back? Or are the coyotes going to push him? Whatever else. So we just decided to pull out, which obviously in hindsight now, the whole thing got eaten.
It's a tough decision that every hunter's got to make eventually.
Yeah.
And I've lost quite a few deer, especially in the Midwest, to coyotes. And so it's the decision you've got to make. Okay, do I risk bumping him and pushing him after he's clotted, and you don't have a trail to follow in the daylight the next day because you've pushed him? And it's 9 times out of 10, it's an uncertain shot. A deer that you shot and he dropped, and the arrow hit behind the grass line or something, and you just didn't know for sure where the arrow hit. So you've got all these unknowns. And so you have to make that decision. Do I go risk pushing him or risk coyotes getting him?
And then, and for
and
every
it's human
story,
nature. You think that me pushing him is a greater chance of coyotes because you don't ever really see coyotes, and so
honestly too, and we just talked about this, that not far from here, there's another dude who shot his and left it overnight, and it snowed last night, so this is cold. Came back next day, and coyotes hadn't touched it.
Yeah.
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 It's just
it's a hard decision, and sometimes you make the right one, and sometimes you make the right one, and something else happens. You just don't know. I think you made the right decision. You just didn't get the result that you wanted, and it's out of your control. And
it takes my family 3-4 months of daily eating to consume that much meat.
Yeah.
I mean, these are huge bucks here, giant-bodied deer. And that doesn't include, we don't eat the guts and all the other parts of the animal. Mm-hmm. And
they did that overnight.
those coyotes ate what takes my whole family, months to consume. They did it in a matter of hours.
What blew me away is how the little slivers of meat along the jawbone were gone.
There wasn't anything.
There was nothing. It was completely cleaned out.
Little bones left, and even the bones. I honestly, we walked up on it, and I'd never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
In such a short window.
They make a living off doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we talked about this.
And they're fixing to go into a winter, and this is what they do.
This coyote country is.
There was 6 around that cattail patch when I went in on that stock.
I haven't gone a day without seeing 4 or 5.
Yeah. And so that becomes the variable that you've got to consider when you're making that decision. I think the biggest variable that you based your decision on is that the deer was laying on the property line.
100%. Which makes you sick.
Whether the coyotes got it or not, if it had gone across, you could not go retrieve it. So you had to do what you did.
And that's one of the reasons
it didn't work out.
Pushed to the fence is because at that time it was 100 yards from the fence.
Yep.
And we wanted to get a shot in it before it got to the fence. And when I say we bumped it, it wasn't like it ran like hell, but
it was hurting.
He was hurting.
Yeah. It was that deer. If there wasn't a private property boundary there, he was easy to kill.
Yeah,
he was easy to finish off.
Yeah.
But that you have rights to land, and there's rights you don't have, and there's not much you can really do about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've had a tough week, highs and lows, for sure, and it's cool that you're being upfront, forthright, and honest about it. A lot of people don't like to hear these things discussed, but it's part of it, and it's the harsh reality of what we deal with as hunters, unfortunately. So
this is a different kind of thing too. I think a lot of guys like you, Brian, you're used to private land hunting.
Yeah.
You're used to boundaries. When you grow up hunting public land and the world is your oyster.
Yeah.
It is a different thing going, well, you're isolated to just this little square.
That antelope I shot this year, when it was getting to a border, and Big Ginger was like, he told me 400 yards out, it crosses that fence, we're done. We cannot get permission. And I'm like, and me even hunting, I've hunted, some areas that were on fences. I'm like, they wouldn't even let us go in there and get it. And he was like, no, nothing. And he literally was like, we'll literally need to sprint and block it because it goes. And they had a large deer jump the fence. And when I say large, I mean 200 plus. Mm-hmm. Couldn't get it. And so that's like, for me, I was like, man, I don't give a shit. I'll jump the fence and go get it. I don't care. Yeah. I mean, I hate seeing an animal just sit there and waste. But, then you look at that and the way the outdoor industry is, then you're labeled a poacher because you tried to do the right thing and not let an animal die. So it is kind of a sticky situation, and all that was flying through my head.
In hindsight, there's a lot of things that we could have done to get it away from that property line. Like we could have pushed it, tried to approach it from a certain direction or whatever, but
push it back onto your property.
Yeah, but you don't know. What if he just took a hard left and just boop went over?
Well, that's a great point. I mean, the place we hunt in Oklahoma is a big square chunk of land. It's 7,000 acres. And there's an old homestead there from a very large landowner family that sits on the edge of it. Mm-hmm. It's only 320 acres. But they have not touched this property in 20 years, hadn't been on it. But they'll never sell it because it's their original family homestead. So, subsequently, it's super thick. It's grown up. And it is just... It is like the nucleus of this ranch. These bucks come off this 320 acres and they live in it because it's just where they live. And originally, when I started hunting there, of course, I identified it and started hunting close to it. But even with a good shot, the deer would go back onto that 320 acres.
Yeah.
And those people made no bones about it. Do not set foot on that property any reason, whether you've got a wounded deer, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I had to make a hard decision, and literally I do not hunt anywhere near it. And it kills me because I can see these bucks coming off of it. I'm just going, oh.
Yeah.
But if you shoot a buck there and it makes it over there, I'm not going to break the law. I'm not going to,
And you just killed an animal that
so
you just gave up to the coyotes.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have to play these games with property lines that public land hunters.
When we were in Nebraska,
no, we don't.
I hold high shoulder shoot does like a rifle. Of course, my setup, I can do that because it's Cabela's property behind us and they won't lay you on. And so, any animal I've shot there has been high shoulder, sub 20 yards, just for the simple fact that they drop right there. Otherwise, you can't go get them, which totally different podcast. And totally weird.
That's
subject.
Just an amazing.
Different pig, different farm.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, it feels like we're ending on a downer note.
Well, it is what it is. I mean, we found the deer, which was good. I mean, like you said in the text, you're like, hey, it could have turned out worse. At least you found it, and you got it, and everything else. So, and people need to learn from it.
And I and all of that, Broderick, that could have been avoided if I was just a little better shot. Like if I had just hit that spot.
I don't know that you're a better shot. You were shooting in some incredibly difficult situations with very difficult variables.
I've seen people do it without any wind.
Yeah.
So
it happens.
It's that decision you make though, because you're like, do you pass on that shot or do you take it? And there's a lot of times where I feel like I would have center punched that deer. in those conditions. That's why I said I wouldn't shoot until I felt it right, and yet it didn't go well. So I don't know. There is, back to your statement earlier, there is no perfect scenario. Some are better than others, but in the real life hunting situation, you truly are dealing with variables, and you got to make the best out of it. Harder said this multiple times. We made chicken salad out of chicken crap.
Yep.
And that's kind of what you're doing in a lot of these situations.
But you just make sure you just make sure that you learn from them. And most great hunters have skinned their knees a lot. They've been through all these situations and learned from them. It's the guys that don't learn from them that continue to repeat that cycle. You know.
Exactly.
Well, it was an incredible week.
Oh, it was so much fun.
Anything you want to add to wrap it up? Any closing thoughts?
Don't shoot past your ability level. I don't know. No, I mean, it was a learning experience for all of us. We had a lot of fun. It's an amazing place. Your dad's come back several times, and it's cool up here. But no, not really. Other than try to learn from each one of these podcasts, from whether it's mistakes we made or the correct things. We definitely are talking so people learn from them. That's for sure. Yeah,
and what I would say is that Aron and Bryan take a lot of heat, but they take a lot of heat for being honest. And I was always raised that you can never go wrong telling the truth, and you can never go wrong being honest. Now, whether I agree with some of the things they've done or do, that's a different subject, but they're laying themselves out every week and being completely transparent for people that are listening to learn from mistakes. And so, to me, it's not, they're getting undue lashback for telling the truth. They could be up here and tell you just what you want to hear, but that's never going to do you any good in any situation in life. If you know the facts, you take what people tell you as the truth, and that's what you base your decisions and your actions on. So, you may not like what these guys are doing, but at least respect them for telling the truth, because you may be an experienced hunter and know what they're saying or disagree or do it differently, but there's so many thousands that are listening that are trying to learn, and they're learning from these mistakes, and they're not going to make these mistakes themselves. So it's a great justice I think you guys are doing. And
agreed.
Give them a little slack.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, Bryan. Thanks.
Yeah, I doubt anybody honestly could say they've made it through a bow season without learning 1,000 things if they hunted enough.
No kidding.
And I don't know if that'll ever change. I play golf, I'm doing the music thing and hunting. It seems like I pick a lot of challenging hobbies.
Yeah.
And none of them can be mastered.
No.
None of them.
No.
And if you can't go out every day and say, I'm better today than I was yesterday, then you weren't thinking hard enough about the things that you did, because there's no way that you made every right decision. Yeah, you certainly have situations where man, I made every right decision and it worked out perfectly. That happens.
Yeah.
But
I know what you mean.
Everybody's a human, the last I checked.
That's right.
And you're just not perfect. You're flawed like the rest of us. Like myself as well. So I actually enjoy that about hunting. That's one of the reasons I like bow hunting, is because every year I'm like, okay, what are the top 10 things I learned about elk this year?
It's very challenging.
And some of them I may have learned in the past, but I just forgotten about. I knew that. Gosh, you idiot! Why did I'm like, maybe I should write these down in a book, things to check on every year before you go out. Here's the 10 things that you keep making this wrong decision.
That's right.
But it's kind of the beauty of it all.
It is.
It's one of the bow hunting is a very creative thing. You're being creative the whole time. You're making decisions. You're trying to see different lines of how a stalk could go, which ways, how's the wind, and there's no perfect way to do anything. So
that's not true. We know one guy that's perfect. We talked about.
Oh yeah,
easy.
There are some people that think they're
easy,
but I think to Bryan's point, I appreciate the honesty on this podcast.
I do too.
And sometimes there's subjects that are real hairy.
I cringe a
and
lot.
really, not just on this in hunting. There's subjects that are real hairy.
Yeah.
And our industry in general, and there's some good reason for this.
Yeah.
Glamorize or maybe that's not the right word, but really it's just the highlights, like the only the positive highlights. It's like, man, you go out, you get in a stand, and it's boom, bam, bim, whack, shoot them, take a picture, send them to your friends.
Yeah, that's the cliff notes of hunting.
Yep. And there's just, if you're going to be a hunter, there's just harsh realities to all of it. And if you do it long enough, you're going to have real hard decisions to make, and you're going to have bad situations that you can't sleep thinking about them. That's all part of the package.
It's problem solving, but all these decisions as a hunter translates into every decision you make in life. With your family, your business, everything, your relationships with friends. It's all decision making, weighing the good and the bad.
One thing I've learned from this, like when Aron approached that buck in the cattails, or even that buck we went after that I shot, that we recovered this morning. You look at some of those situations, you're like, it's not possible. That's like kind of some of the things that go through your mind in the beginning, like the cattails, or you think it's possible. I think the more that I hunt and the more I do this, I go, yeah, we could pull that off. Yeah.
I think stalking, actually just in general hunting, at least for me, the times that I say it's a slam dunk, most of the time it is not a slam dunk. It's like it's a huge letdown. But the times that I'm like, man, I wouldn't bet $1,000 like that first day. I was telling Ryan, I'm like, I'll try to stalk that deer, but I wouldn't bet money on myself. There's 14 deer there, and
25
and
yards.
we're both like, well, let's try it, And I got in there, and it was only like 15 minutes. I was 25 yards from a 170-inch deer, a beautiful deer. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that worked. But that's the beauty of it.
I feel the same way. I think that's one of the things that I feel like I walk away from this Alberta hunt thinking, or any kind of hunt where you're stalking like this, that what seems like can't be done really can be. Yeah. And it's a realization. Now I rarely look at a situation where a deer is at and go, can't be done. I actually go into it going, I go into it going, this doesn't look like, this is laughable. But I also think to myself at the same time, you're going to be surprised how close you come to killing this animal if you don't actually kill it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I think in my head. Bryan, you're going to be surprised when you get there, because you might actually kill this thing. It's like two conflicting thoughts. One is like, can't do it. It's just a stupid idea. And then the other one is, we did it.
But that's the whole premise of bow hunting. It's so difficult. Just the concept of going afield with a bow, that whole concept alone is already, you're stacking the odds against yourself. Mm-hmm. So that's what bow hunters are. Bow hunters are willing to take on a difficult task.
They're believers.
They are believers.
They're dreamers.
They're dreamers.
Do it. Yeah.
Yeah. But seriously, it gives you confidence for everything you do. And I think that most of the bow hunters I've met are very realistic, successful people. They're goal oriented, and they know how to achieve a goal because they face tough odds doing what they love.
Not to disparage rifle hunters in any way or anything, because we love those guys too, because I'm one of them.
But I just shot any rifle hunter would tell you bow hunting's harder.
Right.
Yeah. So it's it's part of it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right, guys. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Appreciate it.
And let's wrap it up.
Nap
we got
time.
some dinner. Yeah.
Drive to Colorado.
Yeah. It's road trip time.
All right.
Thanks. Appreciate it, guys. Stay gritty. In 1907, only 41,000 elk remained in North America. And in 1950, only 12,000 pronghorn remained. Today, there are more than 1 million elk and 1.1 million pronghorn. Why? Because hunting is conservation. In 1937, hunters actually requested an 11% tax on guns, ammo, bows, and arrows to help fund conservation. That tax so far raised more than $8 billion for wildlife conservation. Altogether, hunters pay more than $1.6 billion a year for conservation programs. No one gives more. It's obvious that hunters care about animals, and yet we actively hunt and kill them. Many people cannot understand this dichotomy. How can we both care about animals and also kill them? It's a question that I challenge all of you to consider. Here is an excerpt from the Gritty Bowmen film, Alberta, with a quote from Fred Bear that describes my feelings on this subject. The first shot on this buck was fatal, and it cleanly pierced his vitals, but he didn't go down. I hate to see animals suffer, and when possible, I will always shoot them again if I have the opportunity. I have tremendous respect for this buck and his will to survive. He didn't go down easy, and I have mixed emotions about that. At times like this, I am reminded of a quote by Fred Bear, which somewhat describes my thoughts on this matter. Quote, I have always tempered my killing with respect for the game pursued. I see the animal not only as a target, but as a living creature with more freedom than I will ever have. I take that life if I can, with regret as well as joy, and with the sure knowledge that nature's way of fang and claw and starvation are a far crueler fate than I bestow. I do not hunt for the joy of killing, but for the joy of living, and the inexpressible pleasure of mingling my life, however briefly, with that of a wild creature that I respect, admire, and value. We can argue as much as we like, but the fact is, hunting is man's oldest and most successful try at life. Every human being is alive today because our ancestors hunted. So it's a relatively new phenomenon for people to regard hunting as a cruel and frivolous activity that has no worth outside of personal gratification for the hunter. The funny thing is, hunting has increased my appreciation for wild animals and wild places, not decreased it. And as I watch society lose its ties to wildlife and conservation, I feel my bond with nature grow ever stronger in direct correlation to my time spent hunting. I understand now more than ever that hunting is the greatest hope for creating the next generation of true conservationists. Never stop sharing your passion for hunting in the outdoors. Our wild animals and wild places depend on it. As always, good luck on your hunts and stay gritty.
This is Ty Stubblefield, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowmen.
Gritty Bowmen.